Hi, today we're going to talk about tempo. I'm here on wikipedia.org under the article titled Tempo. So, what is tempo? According to musical terminology, tempo is literally an Italian word for time. It is used in music to describe the speed or pace of a given piece of music. Alright then. Well, first of all, tempo is extremely important. It is literally used to measure beats per minute, which of course any clicking clock clicks at 60 beats per minute. You know, it always has a constant click for every second, so it constantly clicks at 60 beats per minute. However, musical time, tempo, is not consistent. In fact, interesting enough, looking at this piece of music from Mozart's Sonata K331. Oh, hold on, I gotta sneeze real quick. Hold on, another what? Sorry about that. Regardless, let's get into this. Right here it says Andante Grazioso, I believe is how it's pronounced. I might be wrong. Is 120 beats per minute. Well, underneath this photo of the sheet music, this little sample right here, says Andante Grazioso literally means Italian for walking at pace graceful. So interesting enough as it is, the moderate pace of music, the walking pace, is literally 1 beat per every half second, or twice the normal speed of any clicking clock. So we literally walk comfortably and gracefully at twice the speed of time, of literal physical time. So that's an interesting concept to try to grasp. It's pretty cool to think about, actually. And because of that, because we literally, in terms of music, walk with graceful movement at twice the speed of time, tempo, in terms of defining it as time, only works on the musical aspect of it. And in a way, it is time. It is the musical time. However, it shouldn't be described as time. In fact, musicians need to literally quit calling it time, because that's an inaccurate representation of what tempo truly is. And the reason for why that is because in actuality the same physical forces of nature which causes the physical time on Earth, which of course is caused by the speed of the Earth spinning on its axis in rotation around the Earth, is what causes gravity, and gravity is what causes the physical phenomenon behind tempo. And we'll get a little bit into that. So, time isn't a great word to describe tempo. And the reason why it's called tempo in the first place, I'm saying this theoretically, but I'm probably right. is because when the first metronomes were created, which is 1600s era, when those first metronomes were invented, they would have perceived that constant momentum to have been similar to the clicking of a clock. You know, that click, 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 click. That clicking of the clock, which represents time, they would have been like, oh wow, that's, time is 60 beats per minute. Wow, cool. So we can use that to describe time in music through the constant click, click, click of the clock at different levels of clicks, different speeds of clicks. However, the problem with that is it creates, first of all, mechanical dependency on the clicks to not just create tempo, but to understand tempo, but also totally kind of distorts the physical reality of what tempo is and how it's created and what's important about it. And so instead of looking at tempo as time, tempo needs to be looked at as the conservation of momentum. Right here, Newton's cradle is literally a physical, and all dynamics are physical. Literally, not only can you see it, but it literally uses the the physics, the laws of physics. That is a physical and physics representation of tempo. Newton's cradle is. And a Newton's cradle is a device that demonstrates conservation of momentum and energy by a series of spinning spheres. And anyone who has a Newton's cradle literally can pick up one end and drop it, make a click, and that energy from that click is distributed to the rest of those balls to the end of it, and that causes that one to bounce up, and then it falls back down at the same, level of energy, which causes which causes the click and the distribution of that same energy to be redistributed back to the original ball, which continues the process for infinity. And that's what tempo is. This is literally tempo right here, which is great because this is literally a physical representation without the audio of tempo. And so when you realize this, every time the ball makes a click, it creates a downstroke. But the moment it creates a downstroke, it automatically creates an upstroke. And that's what tempo is. Tempo is the constant downstroke followed by an upstroke. And so really tempo physically on Earth, due to the gravitational pull of the Earth caused by the Earth spinning on its axis in rotation around the sun, which causes gravity, which causes everything to drop and be pulled into that force, a power of the Earth's gravitational pull, all tempo in terms of earthly understanding and in terms of literal physical laws of nature. This is literally physics. This is literally a physics representation of musical tempo, the Newton's Cradle. And all tempo literally begins in terms of and I'll explain why here in a second, why all tempo begins floating in space on an upbeat, and it's the Earth's gravitational pull that causes that upbeat to turn into a downbeat, which is the ignition of that tempo. Just like the Newton's Cradle. Think about it. When you get a hold of a Newton's Cradle and literally see, because Newton's Cradle is literally a physical representation of tempo, and I cannot get that across more and more. I'm going to say it 100 more times in this 20-30 minute lecture till it's driven in your head, because when not in motion, everything's still, and it remains still until you lift up one of those balls and drops it. And the moment you lift up that ball, you create an upbeat. And the moment you drop it and it hits that ball and strikes it, that strike is the downbeat, which then automatically creates the upbeat, which then comes back down to create a downbeat, which automatically creates the next upbeat. Like this right here. Click, click, downbeat, 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 downbeat. But you notice every time I say downbeat, it also automatically creates the upbeat. And that's tempo. Tempo is that constant Newton's Cradle of every time you have the downbeat, you automatically have an upbeat. And because of the physical laws of gravity, all tempo has to begin on an upbeat, which leads automatically to a downbeat because of the physical laws of gravity here on Earth. If it wasn't like that and you try to make it the opposite, it would be anti-gravity. Your music would have no tempo or no gravitational force to it. It'd have the exact opposite effect. It'd be extremely spacey. It'd be, if you began on a downbeat and then made it an upbeat, your music would literally be launched into space. And you don't even have to have time anymore. Time wouldn't even have to exist if it's floating out in space, because you're no longer going to the physical laws of gravity. Alright, and so what? And so literally you got tempo right here. In fact, tempo could literally be called Newton's Cradle, because conservation of momentum, tempo is constant. Tempo is that constant click, 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 that constant. The moment you create that downstroke, it automatically creates the upstroke, like the Newton's Cradle right here. However, tempo is also energy. It says right here in physics, the law of conservation of energy states that the total energy of an isolated system cannot change. Same with tempo. Tempo cannot change. And in fact, when you look here and you scroll down, you see mood markings with the tempo connotation. And it's interesting because before the modern metronomes and tempo was firmly established through the BPM or beats per minute, mood markings and tempo were literally one and the same, and that makes sense because dynamics play a quintessential role in how the energy is distributed. And so your tempo isn't just the space in between clicks. It's literally the space and energy constant in between those clicks, within the click, in between the clicks. So tempo is literally the distance. How would you put tempo? Tempo is literally your distance between the clicks, which is your speed, but it's also the consistency of the energy of those clicks in between those clicks, which cannot change. It has to remain consistent to be tempo. So let's look at momentum. Probably even a little deeper into tempo. Right here, according to Wikipedia, it says in classical mechanics, linear momentum or translational momentum is the product of the mass and velocity of an object. Interesting enough, they use billiard balls as the example of energy being distributed by by momentum. The reason why that's interesting is because I was watching a PBS documentary one night and it was talking about Mozart. Mozart said he kept the tempo of his music consistent by memorizing the clicks of the billiard balls. He was also a big billiard ball player, and that was one of his favorite hobbies. And that's interesting because it's using momentum to distribute that force. And tempo, in the case of the Newton's Cradle, is the exact same thing. So without really fully realizing it, Mozart was using the physical phenomenon of momentum, which is what allows for tempo to exist on Earth in the first place, to actually help make his music more solid and concrete. So it says momentum is the product of mass and velocity of an object. Mass is important in musical terms. For example, let's look at the viola family, or the viola instruments. I'm talking about violin, viola, cello, and contrabass. Look at the size differences. The smallest of the instruments is the violin, which also produces the highest frequencies. It has the highest frequency, not the highest frequency range, it has a the highest, or its range is higher frequencies than the other instruments. And then on the other end of that spectrum, you got the cello, and then even more deep is the contra bass. And the reason why those have lower frequencies is literally because of their mass, their size. They are so big that by the time you strike the string on them, that concussive wave of energy is being distributed to a larger space as compared to the violin, whose smaller size literally squeezes and condenses the energy, literally squeezes that concussive wave, that when you put energy to it, it literally pushes it, literally squeezes it and shoots it out in a smaller area. I guess the physical difference between this is, you could say that, for example, the difference between a laser light and a flashlight. The flashlight could be seen as the bass guitar, and that it beams out over a larger area, but because it beams out over a larger area, it's weakened and dissipates, as compared to a laser light, which pretty much compresses that light frequency and allows it to be more I don't know how to say it, condensed is the only word I can think of it. Squeezes it and forces it out in a smaller, in a more tighter way. So it cuts through, the physical plane. It cuts through, the air, literally cuts through the air, as compared to a larger instrument, which is conflicting against the air and is losing that battle and dissipates more within that air, unlike the smaller, higher frequency instrument, or the laser light, which is more condensed, which is why it has higher frequencies, and is why you can look into a flashlight and maybe be a little blinded by it, but it's not going to completely blind you. But you can't look into a laser light because it could blind you for life. Because all that energy is being condensed, is literally being condensed. And in terms of velocity is the rate of change of the position of an object equivalent to the specification of its speed and direction of motion. In the case of music, velocity would be, literally the angle and direction of how you're striking your instrument and where that sound is being projected to, which can literally be seen at geometrical angles, but it can also be seen from north, east, south, or west. And in terms of tempo, tempo should be seen as a constant up and down. In the moment, um, in every upstroke creates a downstroke, and every downstroke creates an upstroke. And actually, every downstroke creates an upstroke. And yeah, basically every downstroke creates an upstroke. It's about 99% of all the world's music is every downstroke creates an upstroke. And so velocity does play a role in tempo. You got that constant north and south. Or in the case of the Newton's Cradle, you have the constant, whichever side you choose from, you have a constant left to right, or a constant east to west and west to east. However you want to look at it, doesn't really matter. And of course, the speed is important. That is and has a lot to deal with tempo. So there you go. That's tempo. The physical dynamics of tempo, and hopefully you got some good indicators on tempo, and the next time you're playing, especially if you're a drummer, see the tempo as a constant up and down. This should be how you should look at tempo for the rest of your life. Instead of seeing it as a constant click, 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 click. See? I'm you know, auditing the sound of tempo. However, the metronome doesn't show you the upbeat. It only shows you the down. It only gives you the downbeat. It doesn't give you the upbeat as well. And that's just as important as the downbeat. And so, next time you think about tempo and think about how it's the click of the clock, just, think of it differently and realize that, the same forces that dictate why a clock ticks at 60 beats per minute every minute, once a second, is the same physical laws as to why music begins as basically an object floating in space that's drawn to the gravitational pull of the Earth, whereupon it strikes the Earth, and then Newton's second law of relativity, where every action has an equal and opposite reaction, literally rejects that, which causes a rebound, and it's that constant bounce, 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 like a drumstick. This is how you should make your drumming. Every time you strike, the drumstick bounces back up naturally, and that's how you get good smooth drumming. And as a string player or as any other instrument, you still have to see that for what it is. You still have to try to envision this acoustically when performing your music. So hopefully this was helpful to you, and thank you for taking the time to listen to this. and have a good rest of the day, and you know, uh, you'll hear from me soon. All right, have a good rest of the day. Bye.